My name is Gabriel Townsend, and when I was 36 years old, I stood in my father's ballroom and watched my stepmother point straight at me, telling security to escort me out. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't break down, I simply picked up my coat and walked toward the door. But by the time the valet pulled my car to the front entrance, something inside me had changed. I was no longer the kind of woman who quietly left a room just because someone told her she didn't belong there, because the hotel they were all celebrating inside had never truly been theirs, and very soon they were going to understand that. That night was the first time in 16 years that I had stepped back inside the building my mother had built with her own hands. It was also the night I finally stopped pretending I didn't know exactly who I was. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people stop apologizing for taking up space, and the truth finally gets a chance to speak for itself. If you have ever been made to feel like a visitor in your own family's history, then you will want to stay until the end of this story. Leave a comment and make sure you subscribe. I built my life 3 hours away from that harbor for a reason. My office sits on the second floor of an old brick walk-up downtown. Townsend Property Law, my name on the door. Paid for by my own work, not with $1 borrowed from family. I write leases, I close property deals, I read trust documents the way other people read the morning paper, line by line, always looking for the hidden clause that changes everything. For 16 years, that was the agreement between us. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. The silence felt like peace, and for a long time, I let myself believe that peace and absence were the same thing. Then the invitation arrived. Heavy cream cardstock, gold lettering, the Harbor Crown's 40th anniversary gala, hosted by Richard and Vivian Hale. My father's name came first. His wife's came second. My mother's name was nowhere to be found. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note in my father's unsteady handwriting. "We'd love for you to come, Gabby." A peace offering, I suppose. The first words he had sent me in 4 years. I almost threw the invitation away twice. But what stopped me wasn't my father. It was the address printed beneath those polished gold letters, the Harbor Crown, the waterfront, the building my mother had transformed from a crumbling old inn into the finest hotel on the coast. I wasn't going there for my father. I wasn't going for the speeches, the music, or the polished smiles. I was going to stand in a room my mother created and remember that, once upon a time, everyone knew she had created it. I told myself I would stay for 1 hour. I didn't even make it 20 minutes. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand what my mother did, because no one at that gala seemed interested in remembering it. Diane Townsend bought the Harbor Crown in 1985, back when it was nothing more than a 40-room wreck with a leaking roof and a dock no one trusted. The bank laughed at her. She mortgaged everything twice. She painted the rooms herself. She learned how the boiler worked with her own hands. She carried that place forward one impossible day at a time. By the time I was old enough to walk those halls, the hotel ran like a watch. Senators reserved the corner suites. Couples booked weddings 2 years in advance. Every evening at 6, the bell on the old harbor buoy rang across the water, low and steady. And no matter what my mother was doing, she would always stop and listen. She placed a brass plaque beside the tall lobby window, the one facing the dock. She had one line engraved on it, "Built on the water, kept by the people who mean it." When I was little, I used to trace those letters with my finger while she worked nearby. During the winter I turned 20, my mother's health changed in a way none of us were ready for. She kept running the hotel from a chair until she no longer could. Then she ran it from her room until even that became too much. She passed in March. I was a sophomore in college, home for the memorial. Standing there in a black dress that didn't fit, feeling like the whole world had gone silent. My father held my hand during the service and told me we would figure everything out together. But after that, we never spoke about the hotel again. Not once. I assumed it had simply passed to him, the way things often pass to the spouse who remains. I was wrong. I just wouldn't learn how wrong I was for another 16 years. Vivian arrived 3 years after the memorial. She was a hospitality consultant my father hired to modernize the brand. Now, at 58, she was sharp, polished, and perfectly practiced, with a laugh she could switch on whenever a room required it. Within a year, she became my stepmother. Within 2, she was running the hotel. I watched it happen from a distance, the way you watch storm clouds move across a bay. First came the foundation. My mother had created the Diane Townsend Fund, a small but meaningful program that helped local kids attend culinary school. Vivian quietly folded it into something new called the Hale Family Initiative. Same money. New name. Then came the lobby. The brass plaque beside the window was taken down during renovations and somehow never returned. After that, they changed the brand itself. The Harbor Crown became the Hale Collection. New logo, new stationery, new website, polished and expensive, with a founder's story that conveniently began in the year my father remarried. And then there was Brooke, Vivian's daughter from her first marriage, 30 years old now, handed the title of creative director and given an office on the top floor. Brooke had never carried a tray through that lobby. She had never helped a guest at midnight. She had never poured coffee in that hotel or learned what it took to keep the place alive. But she redesigned the napkins. I said something once. 4 years ago, at a Thanksgiving dinner I never should have attended, I asked as gently as I could why my mother's name had disappeared from the wall. Vivian set down her wineglass and looked at me as if I had walked dirt across her clean floor. "Diane is gone, Gabriel," she said almost softly. "This is the Hale era now." My father stared down at his plate. Brooke hid a smile behind her napkin. I drove home that night and did not return for 4 years, not until the gold invitation arrived, not until I let myself believe that a peace offering might actually mean peace. From the road, the Harbor Crown still took my breath away. It stood against the dark water, 4 stories of white stone and warm, glowing windows. For a moment, it looked exactly like the photograph my mother used to keep on her nightstand. I sat in the car for a full minute before I could make myself open the door. The lobby was the first thing that hurt. Where the brass plaque had once hung beside the tall window, there was now a glowing chrome panel. The Hale Collection, established in a year that was not true. The window still faced the dock the same way it always had, but no one seemed to look through it anymore. I was standing there with my jacket folded over my arm when a familiar voice said my name, my real name. "Good to see you home, Miss Townsend." It was the doorman. He had worked there since before I was born, and he had to be close to 70 now, but he still stood with the quiet pride of a man who believed the front door mattered. He took my coat the way he used to take my mother's. My throat tightened. "You're still here," I said. "Somebody has to remember the place." His eyes moved carefully around the lobby before he leaned a little closer. "They put the old things in 4th floor storage," he said. "Your mother's plaque, too. I couldn't stop them, but I know where it is." I didn't get the chance to answer. Across the room, near the champagne tower, Vivian turned her head. Her eyes found me through 40 feet of crystal, music, and conversation. Her smile did not change, not at first. Then she placed her glass on a passing tray and began walking toward me. 3 men in dark suits moved with her. The ballroom was full. That was the point. Investors gathered near the bar. A reporter from the Regional Business Journal moved along the edges of the room with a recorder in hand. 2 board members stood near the windows, talking quietly over their drinks. My father was near the dais, gray and tired, laughing too loudly at something Brooke had said. Vivian reached me first. Up close, the smile finally disappeared. "What are you doing here?" "Dad invited me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have the card. It's in his handwriting." "There has been a mistake." She said it loudly enough for the people nearby to hear. "This is a private event for family and partners." Heads began to turn. The reporter drifted closer. I looked at her and said, "I am family." That was when she lifted one perfectly manicured hand and signaled to the men in dark suits. Then she said, clearly enough for the entire circle around us to understand every word, "Security, escort her out. She is not family." The room fell quiet around us. I looked for my father. He was already there beside me, his face flushed, his expression tense, but he did not look angry. He looked afraid. "Gabby," he said. His voice was barely more than a whisper, meant for me and no one else. "Please don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." After 16 years of standing quietly to the side, that was what my father chose to say. Not to her. To me. Brooke had appeared beside her mother by then, her phone half lifted, her smirk no longer hidden. One of the guards touched my arm lightly, almost apologetically. He was younger than I was, and I could tell he wanted no part of this. I looked at the chrome panel where my mother's plaque used to be. I looked past it, through the tall window, out at the dark water beyond the dock. Then I took my coat from Sal's hands, turned around, and walked out without saying a single word. Behind me, Vivian's voice brightened again as she smoothed the moment over for the room. Some people simply cannot let go of the past. The cold air off the harbor met me the second I stepped outside, sharp enough to clear my head. I handed my ticket to the valet and stood at the edge of the circular drive, breathing slowly. Out past the dock, somewhere in the dark, the old buoy bell rang. 6 o'clock. The same low, steady sound my mother used to stop and listen to every evening. But that night, it did not feel comforting. It felt like a signal, like something quiet had finally reached its ending. She is not family. Vivian had said it as if it were a simple fact, as if she were reading the weather or stating the time. And the hardest part was that for 16 years, I had allowed it to become true. I had let them take down the plaque. I had let them rename the fund. I had let my mother's name disappear from that building, one quiet piece at a time. And all those years, I had called my silence dignity. But it was not dignity. It was surrender dressed in a better coat. I want to be clear about one thing. I was not standing there thinking about payback. What happened later did not come from some sudden burst of fury. As I stood in the cold, watching my breath cloud in front of me, I felt something quieter than anger, something colder, something steadier. I felt awake. There was a box I had never opened. My mother's belongings had been sealed away since the memorial, sitting inside a storage unit I paid for every month and had avoided for 16 years. I always told myself I was not ready. That night, I was done not being ready. The valet brought my car around. I tipped him, got behind the wheel, and did not drive home. I drove to the storage unit instead. It was 11 at night, the heater was running high, and my hands stayed steady on the wheel the entire way. It was time to find out what my mother had truly left behind for me. Unit 114 smelled like dust and cold concrete. I had not stepped inside in 11 years, not since I moved cities and pushed everything I could not face into a 5x10 box of corrugated steel. Most of it was still exactly as I had left it. Furniture hidden under sheets, an old bicycle, boxes of tax papers I should have thrown away years ago, and in the back, on a shelf where I had placed it myself, sat the cedar box. My mother had it made the year before she became ill. The wood was tight-grained and honey-colored, with a small brass latch and her initials burned into the lid. She kept her most important things inside it. After she passed, my father handed it to me after the service and said, "This is yours. Only yours." I had never opened it. 16 years. And I had never once lifted the lid. I carried the box to the front of the unit and set it on an overturned crate beneath the bare bulb. The latch was stiff. My hands, so steady on the drive over, were not steady anymore. I wish I could tell you I opened it right away. I did not. I sat down on the cold floor with that box in my lap, and for the first time in years, I let myself fall apart. Not the quiet tears people allow themselves in public. The real kind. The kind that comes when you finally stop holding a door shut from the inside. I cried for my mother. I cried for the 20-year-old girl in the black dress that did not fit. I cried for every 6 o'clock bell I had trained myself not to hear. When it finally passed, I wiped my face with my sleeve and placed my thumb on the latch. And still, I could not open it. Some doors, I realized, have to invite you in, even when the person who built them is no longer there. Instead of opening the latch, I remembered her voice. It returned the way old voices sometimes do, all at once, clear, complete. That final winter, when my mother was still strong enough to sit upright, she asked me to push her chair to the lobby window. The dock outside was covered in ice. The buoy bell was silent beneath the cold. She watched the water for a long time before she finally spoke. "Do you know what I figured out about this place, Gabby?" I was 20 years old, scared in a way I did not know how to admit, pretending I was braver than I felt. "What, Mom?" "The water does not belong to whoever speaks the loudest." Then she took my hand. Her grip was already lighter than I remembered. "It belongs to whoever stays." Back then, I thought she was talking about the hotel staff, the loyal ones. Sal at the door, The chef who had been with her for 20 years, the people who kept showing up because they believed the place mattered. I had not understood her. I had tucked those words away as something a tired woman says when she is trying to make peace with the world. The way you smile at an old family riddle, nod politely, and move on. But sitting on that storage room floor at midnight with the cedar box resting in my lap, I finally understood. My mother had not been speaking in riddles. She had been telling me something specific, something she expected me to find when I was ready. My mother never wasted words, not even her final ones. Whoever stays. I had not stayed. I had left. I had allowed the loudest woman in 3 counties to walk into my mother's house and call it her own. But the box was still mine. Only mine. My father had said that himself. I looked down at the brass latch again, and this time, when I placed my thumb against it, my hand did not shake. I still had not opened it, but now I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was inside, my mother had left it there on purpose. For a daughter she trusted to come looking one day. So I started looking. The latch released with a small click, the lid lifted, and I prepared myself for grief. Photographs, maybe. A small keepsake. The quiet pieces of a life that ended far too soon. But that was not what sat on top. Tucked into the inside of the lid, held by a thin elastic band that had grown brittle with age, was a business card. Cream cardstock, navy lettering. It looked newer than everything else inside the box. Deliberately placed where it would be the first thing anyone saw, not the photographs beneath it, not the memories. This, Marian Webb. And below her name was a title that made my breath catch, because I read titles like that for a living. Independent Trustee. Coastal Fiduciary Partners. Underneath, in my mother's own handwriting, were 3 words written in blue ink. Call her first, a trustee. My mother had appointed an independent corporate trustee. That meant there was a trust. Not just a will, not a probate file my father could quietly guide from the center of the room. A trust, with its own fiduciary, separate from him entirely. I was a real estate lawyer sitting on a cold concrete floor after midnight, and every professional instinct I had went completely still, then very, very alert. The card had a phone number. I told myself it was midnight. I told myself no fiduciary answers calls at that hour. I told myself I would call in the morning, after I had slept, after I was calm, after I could think like an attorney instead of a daughter. But I called anyway. I had to. The phone rang twice. Then a woman answered. Her voice was calm, awake, and strangely unsurprised, as if she had been expecting that call for a very long time. This is Marian Webb. My name is Gabriel Townsend, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I think you knew my mother. There was a pause. Then she said something I will never forget. Miss Townsend, she said quietly. I have been waiting a long time for this call. We met the next morning in an office that smelled like paper and strong coffee. Marian Webb was 60, silver-haired, and precise. She had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without knowing why. She folded her hands on the table in a way that told me she had delivered difficult truths before and had learned how to do it gently. Between us sat one closed folder, thick, neat, my mother's name printed on the tab. Diane M. Townsend Family Trust. Your mother engaged my firm in 2007, Marian said. 2 years before she passed. She was very organized about the entire process. Then she gave me a small, knowing look. People who build something from nothing usually are. Why the wait? I asked. You said that on the phone. You said you had been waiting. Marian opened the folder, but she kept one hand resting flat over the first page, as if she knew that once she turned it, nothing in my life would feel quite the same. Because the trust includes specific instructions, she said. Several of them, actually. Your mother directed me not to approach you first. I was to wait until you came to me on your own. She paused. And there was also a timing condition. Her eyes lifted to mine. You're 36 now. I turned 36 in October. Then the condition has been met. She let that settle before continuing. Your mother believed that if I came to you too early, your family would find a way to make the conversation about money. She wanted you to arrive on your own feet when you were ready to look. Marian's voice softened slightly. She used a phrase I never forgot. She said she did not want to hand her daughter something that could be used in anger. She wanted to hand her a choice. I sat completely still. 16 years of believing the hotel had simply passed to my father. 16 years of watching them rename a fund and remove a plaque from a wall because I thought there was nothing of my mother's left to protect. "Mrs. Webb," I said carefully, "what exactly is in that folder?" She turned the first page. "Almost everything you think your father owns," she said. Then she explained it the way good fiduciaries do, slowly, clearly, in order, watching my face the entire time. The trust owned a holding company, quiet and single-purpose, the kind of company most people never notice, and that holding company owned a piece of real estate. "Which property?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "The land," Marion said, "the waterfront parcel and the building on it." She turned another page. "The Harbor Crown." I had spent 14 years creating structures just like this for my own clients. Separate the bricks from the business, put the real estate in one entity and the operating company in another, then let the operating company lease the building from the property owner. Lawyers call it an OpCo-PropCo split. Families with something to protect call it sleeping soundly at night. My mother had built the PropCo. My father's company was only the OpCo. "The Hale Collection does not own the hotel," I said slowly. "It leases it," Marion corrected. "From a trust your father has served as co-trustee of on a strictly limited basis since your mother passed." She let the words sit in the room. "He has never owned the building, Gabriel, and he has never owned the land. Neither has his wife." I need to pause here for 1 second because I know some of you are already talking to your screen. Open the rest of it, Gabriel. Believe me, sitting in that office, I felt the same way. If you have ever avoided a door for years because you were afraid of what might be waiting behind it, type "the box" in the comments and subscribe, because the next page was the one that truly woke me up. Marion turned that page. "There is one more asset in the trust," she said, "beyond the land and the building." "How much?" she told me. I had to put my coffee down. $17 million. Held in the trust as reserve capital. Untouched, growing quietly in conservative funds for 16 years. My mother had set it aside as a cushion, so whoever inherited the hotel would never have to risk everything the way she once had. But the number was not what nearly broke me. It was the letter. Marion slid it across the table last, sealed in its own envelope. My name was written on the front in blue ink, the same blue ink from the business card. I recognized the slant of the G before I even touched it. I opened it there, while Marion politely turned her attention toward the window. My mother's letter was not long. She was never long. "Gabby, if you are reading this, then you found the box, you found Marion, and you finally let yourself look. I know how long that took you. I know you, sweetheart, better than you think. I did not build all of this so you would be rich. I built it so no one could ever make you feel small. A house in your name is a house no one can ask you to leave. Your father is a good man, but not always a strong one. After I am gone, he will choose peace before he chooses what is right, and someone will offer him that peace at your expense. Do not hold it against him. Just do not be the one who pays the price." Then came the line I have thought about every single day since. "Do not fight them, sweetheart. Just stop renting them your silence." I read it 3 times. Then I folded the letter once, along the same crease my mother had made, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket, where I could feel it resting against my chest. The water does not belong to whoever speaks the loudest. It belongs to whoever stays. She had not been talking about Sal. She had been talking about me. I asked Marion to walk me through every page slowly, the way I would guide a client who could not afford to miss a single detail, because now I could not afford to miss one either. Here is what my mother had done, in plain terms. Before she passed, she placed the land and the building into the trust. The trust then leased both to the operating company, the one my father ran under a long-term lease with modest rent. That lease was the reason no one ever questioned the arrangement. The hotel operated, the rent was paid into the trust. On paper, everything looked like a family business running smoothly, but the ownership of the bricks, the land, and the building never moved. It stayed inside the trust the entire time. My father had been named interim co-trustee alongside Marion's firm, but his powers were intentionally limited. He could approve operating decisions. He could not sell the property. He could not change the trust. He could not remove the independent trustee. My mother had built a fence around him so carefully that, somewhere along the way, he seemed to forget it was a fence at all. "And the successor?" I asked. "Your mother named you sole successor trustee," Marion said. "Full powers vested on your 36th birthday. Until then, the family arrangement remained protected. After that date, you had the unilateral right to assume full control of the trust and everything it holds. The land, the building, the $17 million. I leaned back in the chair. For 16 years, Vivian Hale had been peeling my mother's name off a building my mother still owned. Brooke had been redesigning napkins in a hotel her family was only leasing. My father had watched a guard place a hand on the rightful owner's arm and then asked her not to make a scene. They had been rebranding a house that had never belonged to them, and according to the lease, I had the authority to end it. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the trust documents spread beneath a lamp, arguing with myself until morning. The easy path was to do nothing. I had a good life, my own firm, my own name on my own door. I could place the letter back in the box, drive home, and let the Harbor Crown remain a place I used to know. I had survived 16 years without it. That was the version of me who used to call surrender dignity. I knew her well. The harder path was not about payback. I want to be honest about that, because the difference matters. I did not want to destroy Vivian's life. I did not sit there imagining her falling apart. The picture in my mind was not her face at all. It was the window, the tall lobby window facing the dock where a brass plaque used to hang. I did not want the hotel because of the money. I already had money. I did not want it because of control. I wanted my mother's name back on that wall, and I wanted the false story to stop standing in the place where the truth used to be. You can call that payback if you want. I call it bookkeeping. A debt had been open for 16 years, and now, for the first time, I had the authority to close the account. By the time the sun rose over the parking lot outside my window, I had made my decision, not with anger. With the same calm I use when I sign a closing, I called Marion at 8 the next morning. "I want to assume the trusteeship," I said. "All of it. Tell me how we do this correctly so it holds if they try to challenge it." "They will challenge it," she said. "Let them," I answered. "I read the lease." They didn't. I spent the next week doing what I do best, reading. I read that lease the way I would read it for a stranger paying me $400 an hour, slowly, carefully. Page by page, clause by clause, looking for the sentence everyone else had missed. And on the fourth night, buried deep in the back pages where most people stop paying attention, I found it. A covenant. My mother, careful even with the things she loved most, had written protection for her own name directly into the lease. The operating company had the right to run the hotel, but in exchange, it agreed to preserve and maintain 3 things as permanent features of the property: the Harbor Crown name, the founder's commemorative plaque, and the Diane Townsend Fund. Any rebranding required written consent from the property owner. The property owner was the trust, and now the trust was me. Vivian had never asked the trust for consent. Of course she had not. She did not even know the trust existed. The Hale Collection rebrand was a violation of the lease. Folding the Diane Townsend Fund into the Hale Family Initiative was a violation. Taking the plaque off the wall and placing it in 4th-floor storage was, in the literal language of a contract my mother had approved in her final days, a violation. "Diane is gone," Vivian had told me 4 years earlier over a glass of wine. "This is the Hale era now." It turned out my mother had planned ahead and written the exact clause that made the Hale era something they were never authorized to create. I sat with that for a long moment, not celebrating, not smiling, just quietly amazed by the woman who had raised me. She had seen the possibility of all of this before anyone else had, and she had built the protection so gently, so precisely, that no one noticed they had been standing inside it for years. I photographed every page. I made copies. I built the file the way I would build one for a serious legal challenge. Then Marion called with the information that set the clock ticking. "There is something you need to know about timing," she said, "and it changes things." Under the lease, the trust received financial statements from the operating company. The latest set had just arrived. Marian had read them the same way I read leases. "The Hale collection is refinancing," she said. "A large commercial loan is still in underwriting. It is scheduled to close in about 3 weeks." "What is the loan for?" "Expansion," she said. "A second property farther up the coast." "And the collateral?" That was the part where I heard her choosing each word carefully. "The loan application represents that the borrower owns the Harbor Crown real estate. The land and the building are listed as the primary assets securing the debt. The lender's title review is not complete yet, and the borrower's own counsel has been providing the ownership paperwork." I closed my eyes. The gala, the champagne tower, the investors, the reporter, the speeches about the bright future of the Hale collection. It had not just been vanity. It had been a sales pitch. They were dressing up the company so they could borrow against a building they did not own. "They are pledging my mother's property to a bank," I said, "as if it belongs to them." "They may believe it does belong to them," Marian replied. "That is the generous interpretation." "And the less generous one?" "That someone inside that company knows the trust exists and is hoping you never open the box." I thought about the business card placed deliberately at the very top, where I would see it first. I thought about my mother's certainty that someone would offer my father peace at my expense. 3 weeks. That was the window. If that loan closed with my mother's property listed as collateral, untangling it could take years. It would mean attorneys, hearings, delays, and a mess that should never have existed in the first place. The damage would already be done. But if I assumed the trusteeship before the closing, cleanly and properly on the record, then the truth would not need to be argued. The truth would simply be the truth. No courtroom required. I had 3 weeks to stop being silent. People expect this part of the story to feel explosive. It did not, and that is exactly why it worked. There was no public meltdown, no shouting across a lobby, no clever speech practiced in front of a mirror. There was paperwork, and I am very, very good at paperwork. Marian and I built the file together over 4 days. An acceptance of trusteeship, the document a named successor signs to formally step into the role, a notice to the existing co-trustee, my father, informing him that his temporary position was ending under the trust's own terms, a certification of trust, the short legal summary a property owner uses to prove authority. And then there was the evidence folder, the deed, the lease, the rent ledger, the photographs showing the violations. Everything clean, everything dated, everything arranged exactly the way it would need to be if a difficult attorney read it line by line, searching for the weak spot, the way I would. "You understand what happens once we serve this?" Marian asked on the final evening, sliding the signature pages across the table. "I assume sole control of the trust," I said. "The land, the building, the reserve funds, and the lease," she said. "As the property owner, you will have standing to enforce the lease terms. That includes the violations, and if you choose, termination for cause." Termination for cause. I let the phrase settle in my mind. My mother had left me a key, and that key happened to fit the front door of the very house they had asked me to leave. But I did not sign that night. Not yet. There was one thing I wanted to do first, the kind of thing that does not appear in a legal file. I wanted to stand in that lobby one more time after hours, with no champagne tower, no Vivian, and no audience. I wanted to decide for myself what kind of person I was going to be when all of this was over. So I called Sal, but before I could reach him, the company reached me. A courier arrived at my office at 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon with a thick envelope. The return address belonged to a law firm I knew by reputation. Inside was a 3-page cease and desist letter signed by Gregory Pace, general counsel for the Hale collection. So they had found out I had been asking Marian's firm questions. Someone had become nervous. I read the letter twice. It was aggressive, confident, and in a few places, almost insulting. It accused me of interfering with the company's fiduciary partners and attempting to involve myself in a legitimate family business. It demanded that I stop all inquiries into matters that, according to them, did not concern me. Then came the part that was supposed to end the conversation. Pace claimed the trust had been amended. Attached to the letter was a document titled First Amendment to the Diane M. Townsend Family Trust. According to that document, I had been removed as successor trustee, and my father had been named sole trustee with full powers, including the power to sell. It was dated 11 years earlier. It carried my father's signature. If that amendment was valid, then I had lost everything before I had even begun. For one breath, the floor seemed to shift under me. Then the attorney in me woke up, the part of me that reads the dense back pages, the part of me that knows fear is not evidence. And I started looking at the document instead of reacting to it, because Gregory Pace had made the same mistake confident people often make. He assumed I would be too shaken to read carefully. He had sent a questionable document to a real estate attorney and treated it like leverage. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at my desk, and read the amendment the way I read everything, line by line, looking for the hidden door. It took me about 90 seconds to find 3. The first problem was the trust itself. My mother's trust became irrevocable the day she passed, and irrevocable means exactly what it sounds like. No one can change it after that. Not my father, not Gregory Pace, not anyone. The document was dated 11 years earlier. By then, my mother had already been gone for 5 years. You cannot amend a trust on behalf of someone who is no longer here to sign it. The second problem was consent. Even if the amendment had been valid, this trust required written approval from the independent trustee. There was no signature from Marion's firm anywhere on the page. None. And according to Marion, no one had ever requested one. The third problem was smaller, and somehow it bothered me the most. The amendment referred to the Diane Townsend Foundation. My mother never called it a foundation. It was the fund, the Diane Townsend Fund. Whoever prepared that document had copied the name from Vivian's rebrand, from the Hale Family Initiative paperwork, and never bothered to check the original. A person who does not know the founder's own words is a person who was never part of the real story, and here is what nobody had told Gregory Pace. I read trust documents for a living. He had sent a questionable amendment to the one person most likely to take it apart. And he did it because, years ago, this family decided who I was and never bothered to update the file. If you have ever been underestimated by people who stopped paying attention to you, then you already know how this feels, and you know it can be a gift. Hit subscribe, because the quiet part of this story is almost over. I called Marion and walked her through the 3 problems. For a moment, she was silent. "Gabriel," she said, "do you understand what they just handed you?" "They handed me proof of intent," I said. "They handed you a legal case," she answered, "if you want one." But I did not want a courtroom. I wanted the lobby. Sal met me at the service entrance at 11 that night, when the hotel was running on its skeleton crew. He let me in without a word and walked me toward the freight elevator, the same one my mother used to ride whenever the boilers acted up. "4th floor," he said. "Past the linen room, back corner." The storage room smelled like dust and old paint. There were folded banquet tables stacked against the wall, a retired chandelier wrapped in plastic, boxes of old decor no one had cared enough to label. And there, behind 3 plastic bins filled with Hale Collection signage, leaning face down against the wall like something hidden away in embarrassment, was my mother's plaque. I turned it over. The brass had darkened from years of neglect. It no longer caught the light the way I remembered, but the engraving was still there. Every letter exactly as I had traced it with my finger when I was a child, built on the water, kept by the people who mean it. Through the storage room window, across the Black Harbor, the buoy bell rang. 11 o'clock this time, not 6. But it was the same low note my mother used to stop and listen for. It reached me 4 stories up, faint but clear. And it no longer sounded like an ending. It sounded like a roll call. Whoever stays. I had come up there to decide what kind of person I was going to be. Standing over that tarnished plaque, with the bell moving through the dark, I had my answer. And what surprised me most was how gentle it felt. I was not going to tear everything apart. I was not going to drag them through a long public battle just to prove a point. I was going to put that plaque back on the wall by the window, exactly where my mother had placed it, and I was going to do it as the person who legally owned the wall. I called Marion from the freight elevator. "I'm ready to sign," I said. My father called me before I did. Some part of him must have felt the ground shifting. We met at a diner halfway between his world and mine, in a neutral booth with bad coffee and a waitress who kept refilling our cups without asking. He looked older than he had at the gala. smaller somehow. For a moment, watching him fold and unfold a paper napkin, I remembered being 7 years old, sitting with him in this same chain of diners, holding his hand across the table, and something in me ached. "Your mother set something up," he said. It was not really a question. "Didn't she?" "Before you knew?" I asked. He looked down at the napkin in his hands. "I knew there was a trust." He would not look at me. "I never knew the details," he said. "Vivian's people handled it. They told me everything was fine." "They told you to sign an amendment," I said quietly. 11 years ago. His hands went still. So he remembered. And in that stillness, for one real moment, I saw it move across his face, the grief he had buried beneath 16 years of keeping the peace. His eyes filled. "I miss her," he said. "Your mother. Every day." Then he looked down at the table. "I am not the man she thought I was." It was the closest thing to honesty he had given me in my adult life, and for 1 second, I almost reached across the table. Then he took it back without meaning to. "Gabby." He leaned in, lowering his voice the same way he had at the gala. "Whatever she set up, whatever you found, please do not tear the family apart. Vivian did her best for us. Just do not make a scene. Do not make a scene." There it was again. Even now, even with his eyes still wet, his first instinct was to protect the comfort that had cost me so much. In that moment, I finally understood him completely, and I stopped hoping. "I am not going to make a scene, Dad," I said, and I meant that more literally than he could possibly know. "I am just going to tell the truth on paper." I drove home from that diner knowing exactly how I would do it. Vivian's whole method had always been noise, a loud rebrand, a loud party, a loud command to security in front of investors and a reporter. She used spectacle the way other people use pressure. She had embarrassed me in public because public was where she felt strongest, so I would not answer her with a scene. I would answer her with a record. The witnesses to what happened at the gala, the board members by the window, the investors at the bar, the lender preparing to wire millions against my mother's land, had all watched Vivian declare that I was not family. Now they were about to receive clean, dated, unarguable documents proving who actually owned the room. No shouting, no tears, no clever speech, just the truth delivered to the exact same audience, in writing they could not easily twist. That was the balance of it, and I will admit I admired the shape. Vivian had a microphone and a guard. I had a deed, a lease, and the law of the state. She had spent 16 years rewriting my mother's story out loud. I was going to file the original. That night, I laid the signature pages across my kitchen table, the acceptance of trusteeship, the notice to my father, the certification of trust, the lease flagged at every violation, and the questionable amendment, which I might never need in court, but which I kept because it told me everything about how little they expected from me. I uncapped my pen and thought about the bell, the window, the woman who had built a protection so quiet that nobody noticed it until it mattered. I signed on a Tuesday morning at my own kitchen table, with the deed laid out beside the cedar box. I want you to picture how ordinary it looked. A woman in a sweater, a cup of coffee going cold, a fountain pen, no drama at all. The most powerful thing I did that month made no sound. I signed the acceptance of trusteeship. With that one signature, under the plain terms of my mother's trust, I became sole trustee of everything she had protected. The land, the building, the $17 million. Then I authorized Marion to act. Her firm served notice on my father, formally ending his interim role. Her firm sent the certification of trust to the lender's counsel, the bank still finishing its review on that loan, putting them on clear written notice of who actually owned the collateral. And as the property owner, I issued a formal notice of default under the lease. The rebrand, the fund, the plaque hidden in the fourth-floor storage room. I did not terminate the lease that morning. I did not have to. The notice of default, delivered to the lender in the middle of financing, did the work all by itself. Then I set down the pen, washed my coffee cup, and placed my phone face down on the counter. It started buzzing at 11:42. I let it. I went for a walk. I bought groceries. I came home, made dinner, and listened to the buzzing move across the counter like a trapped insect. When I finally turned the phone over, the screen showed me what 16 years of silence had cost them in one afternoon. 68 missed calls, Vivian, my father, Brooke, Gregory Pace. The same names again and again, all moving through the same panic I could feel through the glass. I did not call a single one of them back. I had said everything I needed to say in writing. There is a particular kind of power in not picking up. For 16 years, the silence in our family had only moved one way. They did not call. I did not exist. My mother's name disappeared from the wall, and not one phone rang to ask me how I felt about it. Now the silence moved the other way, and this time, it belonged to me. The voicemails came in waves. I listened to all of them that evening, sitting at my kitchen table with the deeds still spread out in front of me, because I wanted to understand exactly who these people became when the building stopped feeling like theirs. The first messages from Pace were cold and lawyerly. Ms. Townsend, your actions are reckless and exposing the company to serious financial risk. Call my office immediately. He still called it the company. He still thought he had standing. The middle messages from Brooke were almost funny. This is ridiculous, Brooke said. You cannot just take a hotel. I am the creative director. As if a title handed to her by someone's mother could outweigh a deed. Then came my father's messages, 3 of them, each one more frightened than the last. Gabby, the bank is calling. They are saying the loan cannot close. What did you do? Please call me back. And then Vivian. I saved hers for last. Her first message was soft. Honey, Gabriel. Sweetheart, I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Let's just sit down like family. Family, the word she had handed to a guard. By her third message, the sweetness was gone. You ungrateful little nothing. After everything we built, you think a piece of paper makes this yours? We will tie this up in court for as long as it takes. Do you hear me? As long as it takes. I listened to it twice, calmly. The way you might listen to a weather report for a town you no longer live in. Vivian had told a guard I was not family. For once she had been right. Family does not hold the deed. The owner does. I deleted all 68 voicemails and went to bed. By midnight they were at my door. The knock came at 12:10, then the buzzer, held down too long, sharp and demanding. I looked through the peephole and saw all 3 of them crowded in the hallway of my building. Vivian, wearing a coat she had clearly thrown over whatever she had already been wearing. My father, pale and shaking. Brooke, already filming on her phone before I had even opened the door. For 1 second I considered not answering, but I had spent 16 years not answering doors. And look where that had gotten me. So I opened it. You do not get to do this, Vivian said, pushing forward before the door was fully open. You do not get to crawl back after 16 years and take what we built. I did not take anything. My voice came out level, almost soft. It surprised even me. Come in. You are letting the cold in. That threw her. She had come looking for a fight. I had offered her a chair. They filed into my small kitchen. The deed was still on the table. Vivian's eyes went to it, then away again, quickly, as if the paper itself burned. The bank pulled the loan, my father said. His hands would not stay still. $40 million. Gone. They are saying we do not own the building. Gabby, that is not possible. I have run that hotel for 16 years. You have run it, I said. You never owned it. Mom did. Now I do. This is misrepresentation, Vivian snapped. We will have attorneys handle this. You already sent one. I slid the questionable amendment across the table toward her. Gregory Pace sent me this. A trust amendment dated 5 years after Mom passed, with no independent trustee consent, naming a foundation Mom never called a foundation. I looked at her. It is not even a convincing document, Vivian. It is a confession with a signature line. The kitchen went very quiet. Brooke lowered her phone. My father stared at the document, and I watched him understand finally what he had signed 11 years ago in some conference room while Vivian's people told him everything was fine. I did not know, he whispered. Vivian, I did not. Enough, Richard, she said. And that, more than anything, told the whole room who had built the Hale era. It had never really been my father. He had only rented them his silence the same way I had. The difference was that I had stopped. Vivian recovered quickly. People like her always do. Fine. She straightened her coat, gathering the old confidence around herself. You own the bricks. Congratulations. But the business is ours. The brand, the bookings, the staff. The Hale collection is worth nothing without the company that runs it, so you will lease it to us, and you will be reasonable, because an empty hotel earns you nothing. I will give her this. It was a decent play. She had found the one piece of leverage she thought she had left, and she reached for it. What she did not know was that I had already used the lease against her. There is no lease to negotiate, I said. There is a lease in default. You breached it the day you removed my mother's name from that building without the owner's consent. Her face changed. I sent the notice this morning, I continued. The lender has a copy. So does the board. The board? Her voice thinned. You contacted the board? As the property owner, I am required to. I kept my tone factual, almost boring. Because boring, I had learned, can be the most devastating language in the room. Every board member who stood by that window and watched you have me escorted out received the same packet I sent to the bank. The deed, the lease, the notice of default, and the amendment your counsel was kind enough to put in writing. I watched it land, not on Vivian, she was past landing, but on my father, who sank into one of my kitchen chairs as if his legs had finally given up. The investors from the Gala, he said hollowly. They have been calling me all night. They thought we owned it. Gabby, they invested because they thought... Because Vivian told them a story, I said. I just sent them the documents. The reporter from the Business Journal had been at that gala, too. By morning, the story would not be about the bright future of the Hale collection. The story would be that a coastal hotel company had tried to borrow $40 million against a building it did not own, and the real owner had quietly and legally stopped it before the money moved. No scene, no shouting. Not from me, anyway. Just the truth, sent to the same room that had watched me be escorted out, arriving in envelopes instead of accusations. Vivian turned to me and the sweetness was completely gone. You did this on purpose, she said. All of it. To embarrass us. No, I said, and I meant it. You did that part yourself. I just stopped paying for it. That was when she broke. Not into an apology. People like Vivian do not apologize. She broke into a performance, the one she had probably used to get everything she had ever taken. Her eyes filled on command. Her voice trembled. You have no idea what I went through, she said. The tears came right on cue. Your father was barely holding himself together when I met him, Vivian said. I held this family together. I built that brand from a tired old hotel with a name from the past attached to it. I earned this. Then she pointed at me. And you? You walked away from all of us for 16 years and now you just come back and... Vivian! I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The deed was sitting on the table between us, and it was louder than either of us could ever be. You just spoke about my mother that way in my kitchen, in front of her daughter, while talking about a building she still protected. Vivian's mouth closed. I stood up, not quickly, not angrily. I simply stood, because some things deserve to be said on your feet. At the gala, I said, you told security to escort me out. You said I was not family. Do you remember? She did not answer. She remembered. You were right, I said quietly. I am not family. I looked at her. I am the landlord. The word filled my small kitchen like cold air coming off the harbor. You can keep your name, I continued. Stay Vivian Hale. Run whatever company you can still run somewhere else, but you will not keep my mother's. I pointed to the documents on the table. Her name goes back on that wall. The fund goes back to her. The Hale era ends with this signature, the same way it would have ended 16 years ago if anyone in this family had been willing to read the documents instead of simply signing them. My father made a small, broken sound. Brooke had stopped filming entirely. I opened the door. You came to my home at midnight to tell me I could not do this, I said. But I already did it this morning before lunch, quietly, the way my mother taught me. I had not made a scene. I had simply, after 16 years, stopped renting them my silence. They left. Vivian first. Then Brooke. My father lingered in the doorway, searching for something to say. In the end, he found nothing worth keeping. The fallout was quieter than most people would expect, and far more complete. The loan never closed. Once the lender received the trust documents, it would not wire $40 million against collateral the borrower did not own. The expansion ended before it began. And without that financing, with a notice of default hanging over the lease, the operating company had no future running my mother's hotel. I gave them a choice because my mother's letter had asked me to. They could negotiate a fair market lease under terms I controlled, with the original name restored, the fund restored, and the plaque returned to its place. Or they could walk away and allow me to bring in an operator who would respect the property. Vivian could not tolerate being a tenant in the building she had tried to claim as her own, so she walked. Brooke walked with her. So did the napkins. Gregory Pace resigned within the month. That questionable amendment became a quiet problem he would likely be explaining to a professional board for quite some time. My father stayed on in a small honorary role I created for him because he was still my father, and because my mother had told me not to hate him. 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the Harbor Crown, beside the tall window that looked out over the dock. The chrome panel was gone. In its place hung my mother's plaque. The brass had been cleaned and restored, the letters catching the light again. Built on the water, kept by the people who mean it. I had it mounted exactly where she had placed it, a few inches lower this time, so a child could trace the words with their fingers. Sal stood beside me, hands folded in front of him, the way he used to stand beside her. "She would have liked this," he said. "You doing it without shouting." "She wrote it that way," I said. Out past the dock in the late afternoon light, the buoy bell rang. This time it did not sound like an ending. It did not sound like a warning. It sounded like coming home. I did not take everything from them. I want you to know that because I think it matters. I could have. The questionable amendment alone could have created years of legal trouble and serious professional consequences. The lender would have gladly helped me pursue every possible claim. There was a version of this story where Vivian walked away with nothing. I chose a different version. They kept their personal money, their cars, their house. I did not touch a dollar that was truly theirs. What I took back had only ever belonged to my mother. The land, the building, the $17 million, and her name on the wall. The Harbor Crown runs under the trust now, managed by people who know how to pour coffee, calm a guest, and listen when the boiler starts making the wrong sound. The Diane Townsend Fund sends local kids to culinary school again, fully funded from the reserve my mother left for exactly this kind of future. The first scholarship recipient starts in the fall. I kept my own firm 3 hours away, but I drive to the harbor most weekends. I sit in the lobby by the window and work, and at 6 o'clock when the bell rings I stop and listen, the way she taught me. My father and I talk now. Carefully. Not as often as he would like, more often than I once thought possible. Sometimes he visits the hotel and stands for a long time in front of the plaque. I let him. Grief is still allowed, even when it arrives late. Vivian, I have not heard from. I do not expect to. People who build their lives on someone else's silence often become very quiet when that silence ends. The cedar box sits on my desk now. The latch stays open. My mother's letter rests inside, with the line she wrote facing up where I can see it every morning. I read it before I sign anything important. I think I always will. People ask if I forgave them. That is the wrong question. It took me 16 years and 1 cedar box to learn the right one. A boundary is not built from forgiveness or resentment. It is built from a deed, a name, a wall, and the certainty of knowing what is yours, then refusing to pretend otherwise ever again. Because here is the only thing I really learned. Anything built on someone else's silence only stands until the day that person finally decides to speak. That is my story. One signature. One name returned to a wall. If a family ever made you doubt your own history, go open the box you have been avoiding. You might own more than they ever wanted you to believe. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next story.